Hey everybody, today I'd like to talk about throwing and how to work with your child on performing an overhand throw, a throw similar to what you'd see a baseball player do. To develop the tools that we used when we're observing throwing, we spent 3 years collecting video and working with some university professors from Bowling Green to develop the tools that help us to observe and then cue for what to do next as your child learns how to throw. We came up with 4 developmental levels that we see and we use these all the time. And if you understand these developmental levels, then you also will have some ideas about how to cue or try to trigger progress from one level to another. Level 1 looks like this. You'll see very little trunk rotation and mostly a forward or backward motion as a child attempts to throw. Sometimes with level 1 you'll see a step with the same side, sometimes with the opposite side, and sometimes no step at all. Level 2 is different because we begin to see trunk rotation. This is the trunk. You'll start to see it twist. But in level 2, you're going to see the elbow pull the shoulders and trunk through that turn. And so it's a very what I would call arm-dominated throwing pattern. Level 3 is different because now the trunk is starting to throw the arm, if you hang with me here. So as the shoulders twist, you'll see the arm, the forearm and the upper arm and the hand, they move after the shoulder rotation. So you begin to see this, and what you'll see in the hand is what I call whip. And when we look at this in slow motion, as the trunk gets to front facing, you'll actually see the arms still going backwards in this type of motion. In level 3, the throw is initiated from this arm shape, and so some people will call this short arming the throw. It's very similar to what you'd see a baseball catcher do as they rise up and they don't have a lot of time to stretch to throw a ball to second base or to try to throw someone out. Level 4 is an extension of level 3 in that it's a trunk driven. There's a lot that we're still going to see that lag in the arm, but now we throw from an extension. So we're going to go circular downward and we're going to throw from this big long stretch, and this pattern is going to look like this. We're going to go down, stretch, and throw from that position. Let's talk about teaching cues next. At each level, we have specific cues that we give that help a child to make progress to the next level. Let's start with those students that are at level 1. I have a piece of rope here, and sometimes I use a rope, or you could just use a line on the floor if you have one. But what we do with somebody that is at this level, where remember our level 1 does not have trunk rotation yet. So the first thing I do is put a line on the ground and ask them to straddle that line and throw hard in that direction. And by having them throw hard, it will get them to begin to have trunk rotation. The other thing I'll do with my level 1 kids is start to set up their arms to throw. So I like to put them in this L-shaped arm position from the very beginning. So it's going to be sideways on, straddle the line, and make your arm in the shape of an L. And watch when they do this, that's not down here. I'd like it to be kind of up and high like this. And they'll just throw hard from this position. That's going to get their trunk rotating and move them into level 2. Let's talk about moving kids who are in level 2, where we start to see some trunk rotation into level 3. This is probably one of the most difficult transitions to help kids make. And there's a lot of reasons for this. When we start to throw hard and get our shoulder to lag, they're going to feel a tug in this shoulder and maybe in this elbow that does not feel comfortable to them. And I always tell people the body's smart. When we start twisting really hard like this, it protects itself, so it's going to lock these up. They're going to get very stiff, and in order to get them to go from level 2 to level 3, we have to do two things. The first is this: we've got to get the shoulders to rotate all the way through 180 degrees. They have to go from facing this way to facing that way. When we start creating that big shoulder turn, in my gym I call that a rotini, just like the pasta, the swirly pasta that my kids used to like to eat with butter on it when they were little. Something we see fairly commonly when we start to talk about rotini and trying to get kids to do this shoulder turn happens in their eye contact. We'd like them to start with eye contact and finish their rotation with eye contact, but this is just an artifact of instruction. Sometimes when I ask somebody to get sideways, they will turn their face away from where they're going to throw. This usually results in balls that are very difficult to aim, and if your child starts throwing and you start playing around with this idea of rotini, and then you see them turning away from you, be prepared, because that ball's probably not going to fly very accurately from their hand. And so our cue for that is as you set up and get sideways, keep your eye on where you're throwing the ball. So 180 degree rotini twist. While they're doing that, they have to be able to get this to be relaxed, and sometimes I'll hold their wrist and just waggle that arm a little bit and just say, can you feel that? That's gotta be like cooked spaghetti, not that spaghetti that you just first put in the pot that's all stiff. It's got to be relaxed so that when you start to twist, we can create that whip that I talked about in their hand. So those two things kind of are going to contribute to, can we go from level 2, where our arm is leading us through this throw, and you'll see that elbow precede the shoulders as they come through, to level 3, where the shoulders are now in charge of the throw, and you're starting to see that arm travel backwards in that whip as they go through their throwing motion. Another cue that we use when we're trying to get kids to go from that level 2 to a level 3 throw happens in the legs, and this is just something we kind of happen into, and observationally I noticed that the kids that were throwing level 3 almost to a person had a little dip or a little squishy motion in their back leg, and so now we cue this. So when we're trying to get them to make that change from 2 to 3, we'll just say dip on that back leg and then throw. So just a little flexion in that knee. It doesn't have to be real deep, but it just seems to make it into a whole body movement. Going from a level 3 to a level 4 isn't a really big step, but it's difficult for some kids. The difference is here: they take a circular backswing downward, and then they're going to throw from this stretch position. And so it looks like that. And what you'll see some students do is they'll open up here, and then when they get to throw, they get back into their comfort position, and they'll still want to throw it from their ear. And so it's trying to get them to open up and throw from that big position. The reason that we do that is to be able to generate a little bit more torque and throw the ball farther. Now, a couple other little tips. Sometimes you'll see people put kids into a T position. I don't teach that because I see kids sometimes do what I would call a hurling pattern, where they won't bend their arm, and I don't see that overhand throwing pattern the way I want to look at it. Use a light piece of equipment. I love tennis balls. If you're just at home, these are very light. You can get a lot of repetitions without hurting yourself. The other thing that you might have noticed is I haven't talked about using a target. If you want to develop a really strong overhand throw, really emphasize throwing hard, creating force first, and as they get comfortable, then start to introduce targets. The one exception I make to this early on is that we'll spend most of our time throwing hard, but we spend some of our time throwing to friends, throwing a ball that somebody can catch. And learning how to do that, it's a very different task when I ask you to throw a ball that I want you to bring right into me in the middle of my chest. And so we do spend time doing that. When we do that, we still try to throw with a full throwing motion, but just more gently. As you observe your child throwing and you determine what level they are, it's important from our perspective to think about this developmentally. None of these levels are wrong. They're just the level and the level cues, the teaching cues that are going to help them to become more proficient in their throwing. So if you're level 1, we try to get you turned so that you start to twist that trunk. If you're level 2, we try to get you to do that rotating motion that I talked about and to relax that shoulder. If you're level 3, we try to get you to open up and throw from that big extension. Have fun working with your child on throwing. Thanks for listening.